going to talk a little bit about my research. Currently, I'm working in the Galapagos Islands, and it's a great place to do research. It's one of the great classic localities for biology. I want to start off with this text. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. If you look at the context of this, it's really talking about people who are rejecting God in some way. And when you reject God, you are blinding yourself to what's actually out there. Solomon wrote, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of... No, that was David. Solomon wrote, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. I want to say Proverbs 1:7, I think. It's in Proverbs 1, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, so I want to illustrate to you a little bit how different views, different worldviews, can influence our perception of what we're seeing. Let's start off with Charles Darwin. Those of you who are familiar with Darwin will remember that he went on a voyage around the world on a boat or ship called the Beagle. And so there's the equator there. That's going to be important in a minute. And their first leg was from England to Rio de Janeiro. And then they were doing this survey. So they went down the coast, the east coast of South America, looking at all sorts of things. And you can read his book that's commonly called The Voyage of the Beagle. And it is a fascinating book. It's pretty well written and quite enjoyable. All the stuff that he was able to see there and experience as a young man. Then up the west coast and across to the Galapagos Islands. And we're going to look at some of what he wrote about the Galapagos Islands while he was there. Not what he wrote years later in his books necessarily, although there's some there. Then on to Tahiti and Australia. He said very nice things about Australia. And you can see they visited various islands around the world. They were taking a series of chronographical measurements. And if you've ever seen the film Latitude, you'll know the importance of doing that. Remember, this was a time when Britain was going out and exploring the world. And they were looking for economic opportunities, opportunities for trade, and so on. And that's really what this was all about. Finally, they wound up back in England, and Charles Darwin basically never left home again. So he wrote in The Voyage of the Beagle, the object of the expedition was to complete the survey of Patagonia, which is that southern part of Argentina, and Tierra del Fuego, to survey the shores of Chile, Peru, and some islands in the Pacific, and to carry a chain of chronometrical measurements around the world. He said, the Galapagos Archipelago, this is in The Origin of Species, situated under the equator, lies at a distance of between 500 and 600 miles from the shores of South America. Here, almost every product of the land and of the water bears the unmistakable stamp of the American continent. So he's making an observation here, and this is going to be pivotal in his argument for his theory of evolution. Obviously, in his mind at least, South America was much older than these relatively new volcanic islands, the Galapagos Islands. And so where did the plants and animals on the Galapagos Islands come from? The most obvious place is from South America. That's where there are plants and animals, and somehow or other they got moved that 500 miles or so across the Pacific Ocean and wound up there. It seems almost like a miracle, yet somehow or other plants and animals managed to get around. They just have a talent for it. And so when you go to the Galapagos Islands, there are lots of statues of Charles Darwin. He's the one who put them on the map. Some of them are better than others. This is one of my favorites in the town there. I don't know who precisely thought it was a good idea, but there you go. And you can see I was there with it. This one here with Charles Darwin looking kind of like, I don't know, jolly old St. Nicholas or something, is on the way to the Charles Darwin Research Center there. And sitting on his head is one of the Galapagos mockingbirds, which was really what he focused on a lot more than other things, at least initially, when he was thinking about things. This particular mockingbird does resemble a mockingbird from South America. So it makes sense that the origin of these birds would have been South America, and given the different conditions in the Galapagos Islands, it's unsurprising to find that they're a little bit different. But they're obviously easily recognized as mockingbirds. I want to tell you about our base there when we do our research, because it says something about the vision of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. But I would like to see something like this in Cyprus. And I bet there's an opportunity to do something along these lines here. Not necessarily with evolution, maybe with archaeology or something like that. But Charles Darwin Avenue, which leads to the Charles Darwin Research Center, obviously gets a lot of traffic there. There aren't a lot of people in the Galapagos Islands and not a lot of towns. So Porto Ayora is the main town in the Galapagos Islands. And this is pretty much the main street, Charles Darwin Boulevard. And right there on Charles Darwin Boulevard happens to be the Seventh-day Adventist Church and the Origins Museum of Nature, which has been set up there with a series of displays talking about the Galapagos Islands and things that are there, and explaining a different perspective on life there. Now, I've got to admit, when I initially saw this thing, I thought, wow, that's pretty optimistic. I wonder if anyone ever actually comes in. But I was surprised to see people are wandering in all the time. Tourists only have so many things to do. So if you provide them with something to do, they will come in and see what's going on. Here I am with Dr. Mara Brander, and she was the director of this at the time. She's recently moved back to Brazil. But there we are. On the subject of people sort of showing up out of nowhere, this particular group showed up while I was there, literally out of nowhere. And I can't remember all of the names. However, the woman on the far left is Bonnie Dwyer, I believe it is. She's the editor of Spectrum magazine. The man standing sort of behind her, I can't remember his name, but I think he was her husband. The man standing next to me is Jim Hayward. Jim was on my master's committee when I did a master's. I worked with him for many years. He's somebody who, quite frankly, I love. Unfortunately, he recently published a book in which he expressed his abandonment of faith in the biblical record of history. And then there's Brian Bull to the right. Brian Bull was the dean of the School of Medicine and a friend of mine for many years, but certainly not somebody who agreed with my theology, let's put it that way. And unfortunately, he died just a month or two ago. The next guy I can't remember, but the guy on the far right is Larry Geraghty, the former president of La Sierra University. So I don't know how these guys got together, but they showed up out of nowhere. It was good to see them, and we had a very nice conversation together. For some reason or other, for whatever reason, building this place there in this very interesting, it attracts people to it. And I'm not saying rush out and build one of these before you build your church or whatever here. I know that you have ambitions for that, but consider what the options might be. Consider the options. The Adventist church is in this building, up the upstairs of it, but they were very intentional in their planning, and they came up with something that was very good. So anyway, I don't want to, sort of ruin the rest of your lives while you by pushing my ideas on you. But there you go. This is some of the group whom I work with being landed on an island there. This is a South Plaza Island in English, and it is of particular interest to me because of some of the things that go on it. So you can see it's just absolutely gloriously beautiful. Yeah, it truly is. And this is what we study there. These marine iguanas. They're incredible creatures. This is what Charles Darwin wrote in his diary, okay? And reading his diary while there in the Galapagos Islands is just a fascinating experience. This is not a happy person who is writing this stuff. I think he was an English boy who was a long way away from home and was ready to start heading back towards Britain. That's my read on it. So here he says, the black lava rocks on the beach are frequented by large, that's 2 to 3 foot, most disgusting, clumsy lizards. And look at these things. They're like dragons. They're beautiful. They're absolutely amazing. This is a face that any mother could love. The remarkable thing about them is that in their behavior and in their morphology, in other words, the shape of their body and these sorts of things, they are profoundly different from the other iguanas that are there, land iguanas. I'm going to show you some pictures of those in just a moment. These creatures jump into the ocean. It's cold water, by the way, there. It's the Humboldt Current coming straight up from Antarctica, yes. And it's still cool, even though they're right on the equator. It's the one place in the world that I've ever been where you can actually swim with sea lions and penguins. This is the furthest north that penguins come. It's amazing. They shoot around you, and the sea lions come over, and they like to take a look at you and stuff. These guys, they go swimming out there, they dive down, they eat seaweed, and then they come back up, they swim back to shore, and they climb up on those dark-colored rocks. And it's like a perfect combination of things. They have they're pretty dark-colored themselves, so that's what warms them back up again. The dark volcanic rocks get heat from the sun all day long, and these guys go into the water where it's cold. They're cold-blooded creatures. They have to warm back up again. That's how they do it. One thing that most people don't realize about them is that they are very much like your mother. They have an extra eye on the back of their head. Yeah. There's a lot of questions about what this eye actually does. They can actually see something with it. So it's obviously not exactly the same as their regular eyes, but what does that do? It's a curious thing, isn't it? Obviously, we know that mothers use their eyes to see what you're doing out of the back of their head. But what these guys do, who knows? And they are everywhere. This is just a sidewalk there in Porto, and you cannot go to the Galapagos Islands without encountering these things. They're amazing, amazing creatures. You can see their long, kind of flattened tails. That really helps them with their swimming and things. And they're very calm. People can walk around. I mean, the one rule they have there is you're not allowed to touch the wildlife. But in general, the wildlife is undisturbed by humans, possibly as a consequence of this. So when I'm capturing them, it makes it relatively easy. Now, they're not that stupid, okay? You do have to use a little bit of cunning to get them, but yeah, it's doable. Here are the land iguanas, and you can see that they are quite different. Can you see how much pointier their face is? And this isn't the best example, but they can be yellow, they can be red, they can be pink. This particular one has quite a bit of darkness on it and a bit of yellow. This is what Charles Darwin said about them, but also the marine iguanas. He said, "We have another large reptile in great numbers. It's a great lizard, in structure closely allied to those imps of darkness which frequent the seashore." What's he talking about there, do you think? The marine iguanas, right? He's calling them little devils. They have a ridge and spines along the back, are colored an orange-yellow with the hinder part of the back brick red. So that's just a different variety of them. They're hideous animals. But are considered good food. This day 40 were collected. When you read what he's saying there, a lot of the time, his main concern is, sort of utilitarian. The value of these things is you can eat them, but they're hideous in his view. They're not hideous. They're actually quite beautiful in their own way. Here I am with some of them. Handling them can be a little bit of a dicey business. There was some blood on occasion. That one got me there in the arm. But in the water, they're quite something to watch. And these are creatures, when you think about it, they have to survive on the land and they have to survive in the water. And this water is full of things that would happily eat them. Here's a bunch of sharks just basking there on in a little bit of shallow water. And so they have to be well equipped to swim and avoid predators and all of that sort of thing. That's a white-tipped shark, yeah. Here you can see, this is Mara. She's swimming there, snorkeling away. She doesn't realize that one of these things is swimming right past her. But it's cool. Where else in the world can you swim with iguanas? Nowhere. This is not what iguanas do, except these guys do. So Sir Isaac Newton, he asked a question. He said, how came the bodies of animals to be contrived with so much art? And I want to just stop there. That's really the question that we have about these creatures. Now, the reason that we're very interested in studying the populations of land and marine iguanas on South Plaza Island is that occasionally in the wild they interbreed with one another. So even though scientists place them in different genera, you know, these are quite different creatures, really. They occasionally interbreed and they produce quite viable offspring. Now, we're unsure about whether they can reproduce. You know, when you breed a donkey and a horse, you get a mule, and the mule can't reproduce. So that hasn't been fully established. But they're certainly they survive perfectly well. And they do, though, switch their diet. They do not continue eating the seaweed, because eating that seaweed is a very, very, very specialized thing. So instead of eating seaweed, the hybrids eat cactus, like the other land iguanas. They behave a little bit differently. They look a little bit different. It's kind of interesting. So, you know, in biology, one of the big questions is this question of where does all the variety come from? What's going on here? How do we get all of these different varieties of organisms? Now, unfortunately, we have this term species, and species is not a well-defined term, and it causes a lot of confusion sometimes. When it comes to these particular iguanas, I think most people agree they had a common ancestor. There aren't that many iguanas washing up on the shore of the Galapagos Islands from South America. In fact, that's never been observed. Somehow or other, some iguana somehow or other got there, somehow managed to breed with another iguana that had gotten there, and it appears that all of these iguanas are descended from those one or two that have shown up there over the years. But they do look different from the iguanas in South America. And this particular one is the most spectacularly different. However, it will still breed with you know, these land iguanas. It was a total shock when I found that out. So we want to know, what is it that's making all of these differences? The prevailing theory at the moment is that very slowly, over immense periods of time, there are little tiny changes in the DNA that get selected so that some changes accumulate in these things. The problem is, what good are all of these changes that we observe in the marine iguanas that equip them to be very successful at what they do, the way they live their lives? Incrementally along the way, how would that be helpful? What iguana just decided one day, I'm going to stop eating cactus and I'm going to start eating seaweed? Now, to put things in perspective, so far I've only been able to find one other terrestrial vertebrate, so a vertebrate that is found on land that lives on seaweed. And that happens to be a kind of sheep in the Upper Hebrides of Scotland. On one island, there's this kind of sheep that eats seaweed. And that's a very, very specialized diet. And being adapted to do that means that if you put them on grass and they start eating the grass, they will die. It has to do with their ability to handle copper, interestingly enough. So we haven't really studied these guys enough to know precisely what's going on with this. But we do know that if it was easy, everything would be doing it, wouldn't it? So we want to know how do they do it? And the first thing that we're doing is investigating something called epigenetics. When you have DNA, it's a long string of chemicals, and it just so happens that you can put on little chemical tags onto it. And those chemical tags change the way genes are expressed. By changing the epigenetics of an organism, you can do things like change in human beings, change the propensity to develop diabetes, for example. Or in mice, you can change the color of their coat. There are lots of very spectacular changes you can actually make in things by simply putting these chemical tags on there, and this is inheritable, okay? We want to see if the changes that we're observing in these marine iguanas, if there is an epigenetic component to it. If there is, then there's a whole lot of other stuff that we want to do. Now, does this sound, by the way, this would mean that they could rapidly, or potentially rapidly, adapt to this very different lifestyle that they have. And explain how we get this kind of variation, dramatic variation, quickly between organisms, because we observe this sort of thing quite commonly. What it would mean is we don't need millions of years to get this separation between the marine iguanas and the land iguanas. It could happen in a matter of one or a very few generations, as we occasionally see in organisms today. Some species seem to evolve, if you want to call it that, very, very rapidly. They don't, but you don't see, you don't see a marine iguana turning into a crocodile or something like that, or a bird or something like that. What you see is one kind of iguana sort of varying around in interesting and different ways. In fact, that's one of the great things about islands. When you go to an island, what you find generally are plants and animals that are called generalists. They're not super specialized, and they're very good at surviving under different conditions. It's, I believe God created these kinds of things specifically to ensure that when the land is disturbed in some way, that it can still be recolonized by organisms. But that's just my belief, right? The science is a little bit more hardcore, and it's a lot of work. Trust me. It's
all the genetic potential to survive through every single type of environment that we can face.
Apparently, yes. Well, I mean, obviously there are environments that we can't survive in.
Evolution, like is a reality and not matter.
Yes, yeah, yes, exactly. You know, there are big questions about where new genetic information comes from. Doesn't seem to come from anything other than God. So this is one way of really exploring that and addressing some of these questions about speciation. And we are not alone in doing this sort of stuff. In fact, you may have heard of the finches, the Galapagos finches. Sometimes people call them Darwin's finches. Well, there has been a study similar to what we're doing, done on a few of those, just a few, and it's shown that actually epigenetics plays a very large role in the speciation of these they're not even finches, by the way, into these slightly, ever so slightly different morphologies. When you go there, you know, if you're like me, you look at all the illustrations and you have your identification chart, you go out brimming with confidence that you're going to be able to identify these different finches, and no, that's not the way it is. They all look like medium ground finches, or maybe a larger medium, maybe a smaller medium ground finch. You know, anyway, that's sort of why we're there. But I want us also to look this afternoon at the second part of this statement by Newton. He goes on and he says, and for what ends were there several parts? See, he's recognizing that the different parts of organisms work together to create a whole. You can't separate an organism into its parts and still have an organism. And then he asks, was the eye contrived without skill in optics? In other words, when you look at an eye, remember, this is the guy who wrote the book, Optics, in the first place. So he knows a little bit about optics. The more you know, the more you realize, whoa, that's not going to happen by accident. And the ear without knowledge of sounds. And what he's inviting us to conclude is, no, you need to know about these things if you're going to design towards the goal of having them. So recently, there was this paper that came out, and it really caught my attention. And you're going to see why in just a moment as we go through this. But I want to jump back a little bit. Remember how negative Charles Darwin was when he was in the Galapagos Islands? Yeah. You know, I'm sure he had his reasons for this. This is just a one-off thing, but if you read Charles Darwin's writings and things, you'll see that this was a common state of mind for him. Very negative. Very, very negative. So much of the time. And it turns out that he had already embraced materialism by the time he was on the Beagle sailing around the world. So it turns out that other people who adopt this materialistic Darwinian view of reality also tend towards a very negative view of life. This is Richard Dawkins writing, and he says, suppose I tell you that the eye's photocells are pointing backwards, away from the scene being looked at. The wires, that would be the nerves, okay, connecting the photocells to the brain, run over all the surface of the retina, so the light rays have to pass through a carpet of massed wires before they hit the photocells. That doesn't make sense, and it gets even worse. Well, you're probably looking at me and thinking my eyes are working pretty well. About complaining about something that seems to get the job done, but let's have a look at what his complaint is. he's basically arguing God wouldn't have done it this way. So here's an eye. Around the back of the eye, in the retina, is this layer of light-sensitive cells. So when you look at my smiling face, it is focused through the lens onto those light-sensitive cells, and that's how you generate an image. But it doesn't stop there. You know, the image, having all of those light-sensitive cells responding is doing nothing, right? They have to be connected with your brain in some way. And it turns out that the nerves that connect them all to your brain run in front of the light-sensitive cells. So he says, oh, this is a terrible design. God wouldn't have done it that way. Now, he also believes, by the way, that evolution produced the eyes in mollusks. And in mollusks, the arrangement is the opposite. So evolution is clearly capable of making them, the eye's retina, the right way around according to Richard Dawkins, right? But, you know, so why wouldn't it have done it for human beings and other vertebrates? Let's zoom in on a little bit of this retina. Just take a look at things. So here are our light detecting cells. And the thing about our light detecting cells is that they are very metabolically active. There's one estimate that I saw, take it with a pinch of salt, but it makes for a dramatic claim at least, right? And certainly it illustrates a basic truth. One estimate says that while you're at rest and you have your eyes open, approximately a quarter of the energy your body uses is just your eyes. Whether that's exactly correct or not, frankly, I don't know. But what is absolutely true is your eyes consume a tremendous amount of energy. They're doing a lot, all the time. So if you're using a lot of energy, where is the fuel to fuel these eyes coming from? And what is it that's taking away all of the waste products that are produced? I'll give you a hint, it's red. It's blood, right? So have any of you had the experience of trying to look through blood? I have. I was injured once when I was in high school, and I got blood in my eye, and I can assure you that I was completely blind. Until it went away. So can you put the blood in front of the light-sensitive cells, do you think? No. The blood has to go behind the light-sensitive cells. So if the blood's back there, where do the nerves have to go? There's only one other place for them, right? They have to go in front. So this is what you call an engineering necessity. And you see this all the time in engineered structures. What good engineers do is they figure out ways of taking care of any problems that might be caused by this necessary arrangement of things. But here's the problem according to Dawkins. Light rays come in and they have to pass through this mass of nerve cells, and so it gets dissipated a little bit. Your eyes, again, according to him, could have much greater clarity or resolution if all of those nerve cells weren't there. It's ruining everything. So, I mean, this is just happening all the time. Of course, you don't notice it. Your eyes are actually perfectly good. It seems like a rather artificial complaint, doesn't it? Then Dawkins goes on. He says, one consequence of the photocells pointing backwards is that the wires that carry their data somehow have to pass through the retina and back to the brain. What they do in the vertebrate eye is all converge on a particular hole in the retina. Where they dive through it, the hole filled with nerves is called the blind spot. It's not just a bad design, it's the design of a complete idiot. Now imagine, this is a common theme, not among all Darwinists, but it's a common theme among Darwinists. The body is badly designed, so God wouldn't have done it that way. It's actually a completely theological argument. And let me tell you how badly designed your body is. So let's have a look here. Is there a blind spot? Well, yes, there it is. And I don't know whether you've ever done the experiment where you can find your blind spot, but I can show you how to do it afterwards, just using a sheet of paper with a plus and minus sign on it. I can assure you that each of your eyes has a blind spot in it. And so why do you think that the blind spot is not a problem? How many eyes do you have? You've got two eyes, right? And the blind spot in your right eye is in a different position in your field of view relative to the blind spot in your left eye. As a consequence of that, your brain takes information where the blind spot is in the one eye and fills it in with information from the other eye, and you don't have to worry about your blind spot, unless you only have one eye, at which point it might be more of a concern, but still you get along amazingly well. It's a good thing God gave us two eyes. There are other good reasons to have two eyes, by the way. But what about that problem with the nerves being all over the place there? Well, there's a kind of cell that you usually find associated with nerves called glial cells. They help to keep nerves healthy, and they're like the support team for nerves, okay? In your eye, in your retina, there's a certain class of glial cells that is specialized in a fascinating way. They pass through that maze of neurons, nerves, and they carry the light through like fiber optics. So this is an engineered solution to this problem. They don't just carry the light through. They also happen to tune for specific wavelengths so that they're sending the right wavelengths of light to the right kinds of light-sensitive cells. In fact, what we have here is a system that is about as good as anyone could possibly imagine our eyes being. In fact, just recently, there were, within the last couple of months, there's a paper that came out by some evolutionists saying this is a perfect design. So poor Dawkins, writing all those bad things about the eye and the retina and everything. This is what happens with science. Now imagine me 30 years ago reading Dawkins' book, The Blind Watchmaker, where he says all this stuff. Imagine if I'd taken that as being the best science possible. Where would I be today? Well, I probably wouldn't be here, but I'd also probably be sitting around feeling like I had egg on my face, wouldn't I? Remember, science changes. It changes. And when people make dramatic statements like the ones Dawkins made, you need to always be very, very careful. Is he really saying things about science, or is he saying things about his religion, which happens to be atheism? Okay. He was giving an atheistic view of things. Of course, in an atheistic world, there's no brilliant God to design things, so it must be a complete idiot who designed things. It's got nothing to do with data. It's got everything to do with his particular quirky religion. His cult, if you want to call it that. Yes?
I ask an unscientific question.
Go for it.
Do we need 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, and only 1 mouth?
It's a good question. And, well, the bottom line is you can hear with 1 ear, you can see with 1 eye. I don't know about nostrils. There's just a nice symmetry to that, isn't there? It is interesting to me that developmentally, it makes a lot of sense to have only 1 mouth, just because of the way we're put together. But I do like the fact that that symmetry is there. I think it makes us more beautiful. There are so many things about human faces and the proportions of everything that really resonate with beauty, but that's a whole different presentation. There we go. Yeah. There are an awful lot of things in the human body that may not be absolutely necessary, but they're really nice to have in terms of redundancy. Losing your sight and losing your hearing are really profound handicaps. So having 2 eyes so that if you lose one, you can still see what's going on is a pretty good thing. The same I would say with ears. If you damaged an ear so that you can't hear, it's nice to have that backup.
And also it costs less. I can have 1 eyeglass finger and 1 earring case.
There we go.
I'm buying 2.
Save a fortune, yeah. But I'd point out that there are plenty of other things that are done. We have 2 lungs. It's a good thing I have 2 lungs because, again, several years ago, I had a very, very bad accident and collapsed my right lung. So why was I able to survive? Because I had a left lung. Even though this one's 2/3 of your lung capacity over here on your right side, still with the 1/3 capacity, I was able to survive. So, if you look at our reproductive systems, lots of redundancy built in there. Lots and lots and lots of things that make us extraordinarily robust. One of the most miraculous things about human beings and many other organisms is that you can remove whole organs and people survive. The thymus gland, the pancreas, no, not pancreas, spleen, other things. People said these things do nothing. No, they do something. It's just that we're so well designed that you can get away with taking them out and still be reasonably healthy. Anyway, so here we have these glial cells, and they carry the light through for us in this amazing way. And so, in fact, the objection that that Dawkins proposed is not really a valid objection at all. Let's zoom in on one more interesting thing with this, though. Let's look at some of these, or just one of these light-sensitive cells. Now, I should tell you that each eye has approximately 100 million light-sensitive cells in it, and there are several different kinds. But there's a kind called a cone. These are the ones that help us differentiate colors. And these also, according to Dawkins, are backwards. It turns out that they're actually the right way around, okay? So this is what cone cells were thought to be like. Up here at the top, we have the neuron interface. That's where they send the information to the nerves. Obviously, that has to be on top because it's on top where the nerves are, right? And then here in the middle, we have the cell body. It has to be somewhere. This is probably the place for it to be. And you'll remember, well, anyway, down here at the bottom, the furthest site away from where the light's coming in, we have the light-absorbing pigments. It's totally backwards, maybe. But remember, it has to be this way because of where the nerves are, and the nerves have to be there because the blood is supplying these cells. So it's got to be this way, but this paper that came out, I believe it was last year, was a real stunner because these mitochondria, these are the energy factories of the cell, mitochondria. And you would think that all of the mitochondria that these very energetically active cells have would be causing the light that's coming in to dissipate again, which would be a problem. Think about the inside of a camera. Imagine if there was light being bounced around everywhere inside there. You could never get a clear picture. That's why the inside of a camera is always black, to stop light bouncing around inside. So light is coming in this way, and the signal is going back the other way. And so the question is, how is light efficiently transmitted to the light-absorbing pigments at the back of the cone cells? And these mitochondria play a role. In some other organisms, there's another mechanism for this. So there's more than one way to skin a cat, okay? In comes the light, and this is what we would expect to happen. It'd just be dissipated all over the place. Very little, if any, would get all the way down to those light-absorbing pigments, which absorb the light and create the signal that the cell is going to send to the neurons, which are going to send that signal to your brain, and your brain is going to interpret it in all kinds of different ways, and you're not even going to think about it, and you're going to perceive what's going on around you. But in those cone cells, it turns out that the mitochondria are arranged into the shape of a special kind of lens on a microscopic scale. And what that does is it takes the light that is transmitted in and it concentrates it down into the cone. And can you imagine why it is that it's a cone shape? Because that's where the light is. It is the most efficient design possible. That's why these are called cone cells, because they have this cone at the bottom where the light comes in. This is what they say in the paper. We demonstrated that spatial organization of cone mitochondria allows the mitochondrial bundle to efficiently concentrate light to enhance inner segment, outer segment coupling. Wow. It's taken all this time until last year to figure this out. And all the time before this, people were inclined to believe what Dawkins was saying. Designed by a complete idiot. What do you think? Is it? I'd like to be that kind of fool too. Yeah. Do you think that this convinces people? No. For better or for worse, it doesn't. Consider eyes, this was written here again last year. Consider eyes, organs so complex that they fool some into thinking they must have been designed by a creator. What, do you think you're fooled? Yeah, I mean, it is worth asking sometimes, who is the fool here? I don't want to mock these guys. I know they're very intelligent. I think they're blind. And what we need to keep in mind is that we as Christians have been charged to open the eyes of the blind. That's what we do in society. Imagine being trapped in an ideology that forces you to think in this way. I'm glad I'm not. Yeah. So there are a number of implications. We don't need to worry about them too much, but this is not the first and will probably not be the last case where proofs of Darwinism become progressively less compelling as new data accrue. In fact, this is a common phenomenon. Such tremendous confidence in the science, and you Christians must be science deniers. And you know, there's all kinds of sort of rhetorical things that are used. No, you're not a science denier. But sometimes it is worth waiting on the Lord a little bit. And it's okay to know when you don't really know something. Because Darwinism is as much a religion as Catholicism, Hinduism, or animism, in fact, I'd argue it's a kind of animism, believers will commonly simply continue to interpret the evidence within their old worldview, perhaps not even seeing how clearly misplaced their beliefs actually are. I wish I had a real solution to this, but the ultimate solution is the Holy Spirit. You know, we can present things like this to people, but it's the Holy Spirit working on their minds that ultimately allows that change of mind. This certainly doesn't mean that anyone has all the answers, especially not Christians. Everyone lives by faith. It's okay to do that. Do you think those guys are living by faith, by continuing to believe that eyes are poorly designed and not by a creator? You bet. Again, in these meetings that I've been in this week, it has been almost a little bit shocking to hear how some people express their faith with such unfiltered confidence, even though problems with evolutionary theory, limitations to evolutionary theory were being presented. There were people who were saying openly that they have faith that solutions to those problems will be found in the future. Why can't I say the same thing as a believer? You know, at least my faith is built on a historical reality. God, the Creator, came down to earth, lived amongst us, was crucified, was raised again on the third day, demonstrated his power over death. What's atheism got, other than denying history? Oh, is it? Yeah. Did it? Well, hopefully. So anyway, getting back to the Galapagos Islands. You know, one day I was scouting around to see where there might be some more of these marine iguanas, and I came across this this sea lion. And look at it, he's on his throne, you know, he's master of his domain there. Yes, I was there with him. I could have walked up and given him a pat. It probably would have been a very bad idea. I didn't do that. But, you know, to me, being there with these amazing creatures, having them unafraid, that's what heaven's going to be like for me. I'm going to have a pet lion and a pet sea lion. I hope my wife doesn't mind. But, you know, as I said, it's like heaven. It's absolutely glorious, beautiful. This is what Darwin wrote. The country was compared to what we might imagine the cultivated parts of the infernal regions to be. For him, it was hell. For me, it's heaven. What's the difference? Yeah. You know, if nothing else, Christianity liberates us to see the beauty and enjoy the wonder. And, oh dear me, these sea lions are everywhere. They laze around like, I don't know, drunks in the park on a Saturday night. There they are. You can see here, that's a particularly big one sleeping with them in the middle. I'll tell you the story of this one because I think you kids will like this. This is at one of the hotels there, and this guy was hanging out on this chaise lounge, and then he took a little swim in the swimming pool. He was living the life. He got out of the swimming pool, and I mean, it all happened so fast, I wish I'd videotaped it or something. He saw this woman that you see there in the background, lying on this bench in the foreground, but she had a pillow on there, right? So he came over and started nudging her, and she didn't get the message fast enough. So he just sort of jumped up on there and wiggled his way in and pushed her off the other side of the thing. We're all laughing our heads off, as you can imagine. Yeah. Where else in the world do you get to see that? One time, when I was there a while ago, I had one of these juveniles come up to me and actually sniff my leg like a dog or something. I was a little bit nervous. I was thinking, is he gonna take a nibble to see what I taste like as well? You know, what's up? But no, he was just being friendly, checking me out, you know. Wow. And it's, you walk around, there are mothers with their babies everywhere. I don't know whether you can see the baby here in this photo. I'm sorry, that isn't very well in focus, but don't worry about it. If you want to see this afterwards, I'm happy to show it to you. I was there when this baby was born. It was just so beautiful. Such a wonderful, I don't know, experience to be there and be part of all of this thing. I just thank God for that opportunity. This is what God says. God, the Lord, who created the heavens and stretched them out, who spread forth the earth and that which comes from it, who gives breath to the people on it and spirit to those who walk on it. I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness and will hold your hand. I will keep you and give you as a covenant to the people, as a light to the Gentiles, to open blind eyes, to bring out prisoners from the prison, those who sit in darkness from the prison house. This is the God who we worship. This is what he promises to you and to me. Again, I know that you are, at the beginning of what is going to be a huge investment. And everything isn't going to work perfectly. It's going to be a struggle. Maybe you're going to try things once and it isn't going to work perfectly. And then you'll have to come back and regroup and rethink things and try again. But God will be with you. He has called you to open the eyes of the blind, to free people from these mental prisons that they have themselves in, that are just as real. I mean, imagine being trapped in the mindset of Darwin or Dawkins. Imagine that. Not being able to see the beauty. Probably one of the saddest things that Darwin ever wrote, at least from my perspective, and I should have put the quote in here, but I thought I'd make it faster than it has been. But he wrote, this was in his autobiography, and he talks about how he has lost all appreciation for beauty. He no longer appreciates beautiful scenery. He no longer appreciates beautiful poetry. He can't stand to read Shakespeare. He's, paintings do nothing for him. He's lost it. That's inevitable. That's inevitable. When you adopt a materialistic worldview. So sad. So sad. But, this is what Christ opens before us, the opportunity to see and enjoy, to taste and see that the Lord is good. So anyway, again, blessings on you as you undertake this endeavor. Blessings. Yeah, as I said, you'll be in my prayers, but I have faith that God will bless. Again, don't forget Creation Sabbath. Just to give you an idea, I think this is the map from last year. These are all places that registered that they were doing events around the world. Obviously, there are a lot more, but there's a certain percentage that people or churches that will register that they're doing something. If you're doing something, go to our creationsabbath.net webpage and register your event so we know what's going on here in Nicosia or wherever else it is in Cyprus. If you want more information about things, I encourage you to visit our website, GRI-SDA.org. And you may also be interested, if you'd like to see some films, many of which I've worked on. These cover a wide gamut of things. So some of them are about various theological things. I didn't work on those, but the ones about nature and so on, I've been involved with many of those. Go and take a look at these John 10:10 Project films, and please feel free to share them anywhere that you would feel that would be valuable. You'll also find a bunch of films at our webpage as well. All right, thank you very much. God bless you.